Joining me today to talk about all things brand is the founder and principal of Brandology, Michel Hogan. Welcome, Michelle.
Thanks, Fiona.
I thought today maybe we could discuss what glaring errors are commonly made with a company's brand, because this is what you're called in to sort out from time to time. So maybe you could start off by outlining what the most obvious errors that are made that you see all the time.
And there's a bunch, and they're just about as long. How long's a piece of string? Because as many different companies as there seem to be that many errors that people make. And I don't really call them errors or mistakes so much, because people don't go into it with wrong intention. But I think probably the number one thing I think people don't do, or mistake that they make, is that they're not consistent. That's certainly the biggest thing, because when you're trying to build sort of a connection between who you are and your marketplace and your audience and your customers, they'll pick up on stuff that has, that seems to be really insignificant, that seems to be really not important at all, and that's the stuff that they see and go, well, hang on a minute, that doesn't feel right, that doesn't see right, that doesn't sit right. So this idea of actually, what do you say, what do you do, and how do you think, and making sure that those three things, as much as is practical, are actually in alignment and not doing that is actually the biggest mistake I see people make. Now that manifests itself in lots of different ways.
What are they?
Well, some of the classics are talking about how important customer service is to you, and then
they're not delivering.
Not delivering, but even making it really hard for people to get in touch with you. Really simple stuff.
No phone number on your website.
Or buried.
How common is that?
Yeah, or buried so deeply that you can't even find it. So immediately, if you talk about how important customer service is to you, that makes me go, well, clearly it's not that important to you that you want to actually make it easy for me to get in touch with you. Having, not backing up your products and services with, warranties and guarantees. If you have confidence in their quality and in what they deliver, there is absolutely no reason to do that. And yet so many people don't. They look at, people take advantage of it. It's
How many would take advantage? There's a small percentage of the
really
population,
small.
but
most
it's
won't.
not a general trend.
It's not. Most won't. Really, most won't. And the trade-off of the very few who do.
Yes.
is just enormous. I think another mistake that people make, a really big one, and I think we've talked about this in a past interview we did, is focusing way too much on the look and the feel and the outward stuff at the expense of bringing a real understanding inside the organisation.
Yep. Too funky, slick, sexy.
Yeah, and worrying that, it's not exactly, getting really caught up in that, in all the look and the feel side of it, to the point where, well, if it's not exactly that blue every single time, it's just not going to work, it won't be right. And that's just rubbish, actually, because, for the most part, the general population doesn't notice and couldn't care less.
Yeah.
They really couldn't.
It's fascinating, isn't it?
They really couldn't.
But they do get a sense, as you mentioned earlier, that if things are inconsistent, don't they? So if the messages are not in alignment, they do pick up on that, correct?
All the time, yeah. And I think that's the biggest one. I mean, that really is. If you're saying it over here and doing something completely different, you're done before you start. I mean, there is absolutely no way you can build a strong brand or maintain a strong brand if that's the way you operate.
Yeah.
Just doesn't happen. And people live in la la land. They really do. It's funny. I mean, I'm working with an organisation at the moment, and we're doing some, we're investigating some stuff, and I've been asking, sort of talking to different people in the company, and I've been asking, what are the most important things that you think people should know about your company, and and across the board, people are giving me these answers, and I don't know, I've had the same answer twice.
Really?
And then one of the other questions I asked them is,
how well, to what you say about core values, shouldn't they should have an understanding of the core values of the company? Therefore, the same thing should be coming up.
They should. I mean, it's not that it's out of this world disparate, but there is a fair bit of play in there. But the second question I asked them is really, it shows the La La Land piece of it, because I sort of said to them, well, how well do you think everyone overall in the organisation understands, what you stand for and what's important? Oh yeah, it's really good across the board. Everybody has a great.
You found otherwise?
Well, the first question I asked showed it to be true. Yeah. I mean, the fact that what two things, and I didn't get the same two things twice. So, it's one of those, companies, it's really easy to get tied into your own stuff and not stand back and look and say, well, is this really what's happening?
Yeah.
And companies spend, and again, it goes back to the over-focus on the external stuff. They get so tied up in what that should be that they forget to actually communicate it back down. Into the organisation, or make sure that what they're communicating is in sync, with the organisation.
Now, returning to an external focus, what is the biggest brand mistake that you've ever seen or noticed?
Oh dear God. Let's see. That's a really good question, because there's so many that jump up and spring to mind. I'll limit it back down to the last 12 months. I think one of the classics that I noticed was actually something Qantas did, where after their little air problem over Western Australia, where they, huge big hole in the fuselage and the plane dropped 2 kilometres in the air or whatever it was, and the entire, everybody hit the ceiling and heaps of people injured and all the rest of it. When it came to actually giving those people compensation, Qantas's decision was to give compensation based on seating class.
Ooh.
And it was like, because of course people in first class were so much more scared than anybody in economy. I mean, sure.
Were they more injured?
Yeah,
probably not.
Exactly. There was a whole range of things around that, and we're not talking here about giving them another ticket.
Yeah.
Which of course everyone on the plane got, and that's fair enough. You get compensated with a ticket.
Because
the same
flight
ticket that you bought.
Successful.
Yeah, the ticket the same, the one that you bought. But no, this was compensation for fear and pain and suffering and
injury.
And injury. And I was just like, okay, there's something really wrong with that. And that one really struck me. I'm not sure it qualifies as the biggest brand mistake that's happened in the last 12 months.
But it jumped out at you.
But it really jumped
glaring.
out at me because it was just so fundamentally, just to me, really spoke fundamentally to really where Qantas's head is at in terms of how it views its business. I mean, that was really frightening to me.
Given a mistake like that and how you view it and many others, when we have an insight, we're likely, there's 1,000 people standing behind us having the same one.
Without question.
How easy is it to correct when you start making those mistakes? Or is this just a whole area of misperception they've got into now?
I think you can certainly correct things. I think the misnomer is that you can just turn it around on a dime, because typically those type of mistakes and any type of behaviours that lead to those types of decisions are somewhat endemic. So they're not something that's just jumped out of nowhere, right? They've evolved over a period of time. It's generally a slow erosion. It's an incremental shift.
Yeah.
This decision was made, and so the next one that was made sort of was a little bit further, just over time.
So in a sense, Michelle, if it's glaring, it's probably better because it's obvious to many people within the organisation, and therefore it can be corrected.
It can be. It certainly is something that then can be perhaps noticed.
Yeah.
Jim Collins came out with a new book last year called Why the Mighty Fall, and a lot of that was talking about, even though it was talking about business and the decisions that businesses make, really it has a lot of lessons in it that are around brand mistakes as well, because that's the way brand stuff happens too.
Yeah.
The progression that he talks about in that book. And so typically by the time you get to stage 5, where it's extremely obvious to everybody that everything's falling apart at the seams, there's been a long period to get to that point of erosion to get to that point. And so to your question, how do you turn it around? Unlike his assessment of businesses that get to level 5 where they're pretty much done, there's not much you can do with them. I think brands can be turned around, but again, it's got to be done from the inside out. It's got to be done slowly and with attention to the things that led, basically fixing the erosion.
Michelle, thank you for your time today.
My pleasure. Thanks, Fiona.
I've been talking to Michel Hogan, who's the founder of Brandology, and we'll join you again in a few weeks for more discussion around brand matters.